Welcome, all you Arrowheads and GATVers, to Episode 3 of the Grand Experiment, GATV Loosed, the Week in Arrow for the week of March 5th to 11th, 2017. I'm your host, Matt Tucker, editor and senior writer at GreenArrowTV, and this week's show is a little different from our last couple of episodes. No, our co-hosts have still not yet surfaced. We're working on that soon. But this week, we don't have a new episode to talk about. As happens in a TV season that spans 7 to 8 months with only, in quotation marks, 23 weekly episodes, sometimes the show has to take some breaks to stretch that time. Unlike winter around the holidays, the spring is the point of the year where the show might be off for a week, back on for a week or two, then off for 2 more weeks. Thankfully, looking at the schedule, this was the only break for March. New episodes should run the rest of the month. So for this week's episode, we'll tackle the news, and we'll also launch a new feature appropriately called The List, covering faves, dislikes, character features, silly questions, and many other top 3s, 5s, or maybe even 10s about various aspects of the show. Our focus this week is Mr. JOHN DIGGLE. But let's kick things off with news. Arrow News of the Week can be found in full at GreenArrowTV.com. Up top, I'll issue a minor spoiler alert. If you don't want to know anything about the next few episodes, you want to skip ahead. For the rest of us, these are all relatively minor in the spoiler realm. Let me preface this by pointing out how Russian-focused everything is this week. My father was a Russian linguist for the better part of 20 years in the U.S. Navy, so I should do better by him with the Russian words, but these pronunciations are likely to be hit or miss. Kind of like the show. Item 1 this week, the official description of episode 517, Kapiushon. Close enough. The title of the episode is loosely translated as the Russian word for hood. The description of the episode is: the breaking point. Prometheus goes to great lengths to break Oliver. Meanwhile, in the flashbacks, Talia becomes worried about Oliver's increasingly violent tendencies, which come to a head in a brutal confrontation. Kevin Tancaroen directed the episode, written by Brian Ford Sullivan and Emilio Ortega Aldrich. The writing duo have given us the episodes Al-Sahim in Season 3 and AWOL in Season 4. The director last directed Season 4's Monument Point, has taken the helm for episodes in all 4 of the DCWU series, has directed episodes for Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and the upcoming Marvel's Iron Fist, and is likely best known as the director of the Mortal Kombat Legacy live-action web series. Episode 17 is set to air on March 22nd. Based on previews for next week's episode Checkmate, it appears Prometheus kidnaps Susan Williams and plans to use her capture and torture as a way to get to Oliver. What are the great lengths beyond that he will use to break Oliver? One of the great aspects of Season 2 was the way Slade Wilson kept ratcheting up the tension with Oliver, and Adrian Chase seems to be following suit here. This is perfect for this last run of episodes to set up the confrontation in the season finale. As important, it sounds like Oliver has flipped a switch in the flashback storyline and begun to embrace the darker, more vicious killer in the hood that we'd come to meet in Season 1. Oliver giving himself over in the past to match serve with the rising pressure in the present has the potential to be a really strong episode on both fronts. Our next item, the title and credits for episode 520. As has become common tradition, exec producer Mark Guggenheim shared the title page of the script for the latest episode in production. Filming this week and set to wrap production on Wednesday the 15th is episode 20 of the season. The title is revealed to be Underneath. Underneath what, underneath where, or underneath whose skin remains to be seen. Perhaps this is the episode that Prometheus's identity is finally revealed to Oliver and company, a chance to finally see who is underneath the mask. We'll gloss over the fact I offhandedly referred to a 1980s animated Disney movie, and instead ponder the idea that they could wait 4 more episodes before letting the characters on the show in on what the audience already knows. I kind of hope that's the case. Of note, the creative team behind the episode are all women. Wendy Miracle, of course, one of the showrunners, and longtime series writer Beth Schwartz have written the episode, and prolific director Wendy Stansler takes the reins. She last directed Restoration in Season 4, and she also put in time on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., as well as over on Gotham. She's also done a number of episodes for FXX's superb comedy, You're the Worst. Item 3 in the news this week, the preview images for episode 517, Kapiushon. The images largely focus on the return of Dolph Lundgren as Konstantin Kovar in the flashback storyline. Oliver's hooded figure seems to be terrorizing Kovar's gang in what will become a staple of the first few years of his crusade in Starling City. Fights at the docks. We're also privy to a return of Kovar in the Tux, as some of the action seems to take place at his casino. And Oliver shares scenes with Galina, the woman working for Kovar, who also happens to be Tiana's mother. You can see his hair getting longer here, but unless he drops some Rogaine-laced Miracle Grow on that head of his, even with the 4 or 5 months between the end of spring and the start of fall when he's actually rescued and returned to Starling City, it's difficult to see how he becomes the mountain man picked up by the boat in enough time. That's a lot of disbelief to suspend. Our fourth item up, the official description for episode 518, Disbanded. We got not one, but 2 official descriptions this week. The OD for Disbanded also dropped, and it reads as follows. Oliver calls on the Bratva for help. Diggle and Felicity are shocked by Oliver's decision to call on the Bratva to help take down Prometheus. Concerned the Bratva may overstep, Diggle has a hard conversation with Oliver about what happens if things go south. Meanwhile, Felicity learns something shocking at Helix. J.J. Maccaro directed the episode, written by Rebecca Bellato. The original air date is March 29th. Oliver turning to the Bratva makes sense thematically, given the present day's relationship to the past this season with the flashbacks. It also demonstrates the level of concern, nay despair, that Oliver has in trying to stop Adrian Chase. Obviously, we still don't know if Oliver's fully aware that Chase is Prometheus by this episode, though it seems somewhat likely. Prometheus is pushing Mayor Queen to the edge in nearly every facet of his life, so Oliver feels compelled to call on this resource. Yet Oliver's relationship to the Bratva has been a begrudging one throughout the series. He went to the Bratva lieutenant/mechanic Alexei Leonov early on as a last measure to get information he couldn't find elsewhere. With Oliver's reluctance to aid Anatoly and the Bratva when the team visited Russia a few weeks back, plus the icy reception Oliver got over having gotten Alexei killed by Slade Wilson back in Season 2, strictly because he wouldn't return Alexei's favors, it's easy to see why Diggle and Felicity would both be mucho disturbed by Oliver turning to them for help. But hey, it sounds like we're getting a patented Diggle life lesson, manhood lesson out of it, so we have that to look forward to. Prochnost. And finally, our fifth item this week, will Talia appear in present-day Star City? This comes from this week's spoiler room from Entertainment Weekly, where the fan question was put to Mark Guggenheim. For those following along with us on YouTube, we'll link to the EW.com article in the description below. Guggenheim confirmed, saying we will see her in the present day. What she wants from Oliver in the past is very different from what she wants from him in the present. That makes a great deal of sense, considering Oliver killed her father, assumed the role of Ra's al Ghul, even if only briefly, installed Malcolm Merlyn in control of the League of Assassins only to watch the League end, and is still, technically, her brother-in-law. It's a bit of a different time from 5 years ago. The release trailer for next week's episode, Checkmate, already suggested that Talia was going to appear in the present day, seemingly revealing that it is she who winks nudges Oliver in on Adrian Chase's extracurricular activities. So perhaps this answer from Guggenheim flows right into next week's episode. Or, again, we've been struck by the notorious CW marketing team trailer bug. We'll find out on Wednesday the 15th. That is your Arrow news for the week of March 5th to 11th. Again, you can follow up with these stories at GreenArrowTV.com. Feel free to comment on the article for this episode on the site or any of the individual news articles in the comments on the YouTube channel, in the GATV section over at the KSiteTV forums, or on social media. And that, my friends, moves us on to the list. Maybe we would get some poppy, kitschy drive-time radio theme music or something to intro the new feature going forward. For our first edition of the list, I wanted to come out swinging big. We've wanted to run some features focusing on the characters of Arrow on the site for a while now, so it seemed only natural to kick things off with a spotlight of one of the most popular, and certainly one of my favorite, characters on the show, JOHN DIGGLE. Your list this week is the top 5 Diggle-centric episodes of Arrow to date. To be fair, this list is a tad limited because while we've had some good Diggle plotlines through a number of episodes, and certainly a fair number of great Diggle scenes, there have only been a handful of Diggle-centric episodes. Looking back on the series for this piece, I was reminded of that very fact and at how criminal it is that there aren't more. Some episodes with a strong Diggle flavor worth mentioning: Lone Gunman and Home Invasion from Season 1, Corto Maltese from Season 3, and Restoration, Brotherhood, and Genesis from Season 4. JOHN DIGGLE was brought into the series as a means to provide reason to a man who could not be reasonable. A newly created character for the show, named in part after an influential writer of Green Arrow comics, he initially presented a fun, distracting challenge for Oliver and the audience. Diggle worked private security, and he was hired by Moira Queen to both protect and keep an eye on her son, now returned after being believed dead for 5 years. Some of the great humor from the first few episodes of the series were the ways Oliver had to give Diggle the slip to carry on his crusade. It wasn't a sustainable dynamic, though, and thankfully it didn't take them long to reveal the truth to John and present him with a choice: to join Oliver in his campaign. What's always worked about Diggle is that he's the older counterpoint the series needed with its younger stars, but not so much older that he was cut out of the loop or out of touch with the main plots of the story. Though characters like Moira, Walter Steele, Quentin Lance, and Malcolm Merlyn played, and continue to play, integral parts in the show's plots, as is often the case with a series on the CW, the adults were kept more at bay to allow the younger audience to relate to its youthful cast. Diggle served as a bridge between them. In the show, he's about 8 years older than Oliver, while in reality, David Ramsey is about 9.5 years older than Stephen Amell. More often than not, they feel of a similar time, more brothers close in age than anything. It's the moments when Oliver needs guidance and sound reason that Diggle's experience steps forward. This is a man who devoted his life to being a soldier. He had a marriage that went south under his belt, and a blood brother he felt for so long he had let down because he'd believed been killed. This was a man trying to provide some solace and stability to his brother's widow and his nephew, a man with some years, but a lot more mileage on him. That's not to say Oliver hadn't experienced anything. The course of the series has shown he's had an extraordinary 5 years away from the life he knew that prepared him for what he was ultimately going to become. But his life was so extreme that Diggle's more standard complexity, in addition to his humanity and innate sense of right and honor, tempered and informed Oliver into the man he is today. Diggle's the ultimate touchstone, and is helpful not because he's sermonizing, but because he presents a sober, honest, and lived-in perspective that helps ground Oliver and the rest of Team Arrow in a life that has become fantastic and perilous. David Ramsey's approach to Diggle has always been to make him the solid foundation. When the others train, it's often against Diggle because he's the core of what they need to achieve. Diggle's had his moments to be angry, but more often than not, he's the solid tree weathering the storm and providing the anchor the team needs with such volatile personalities. His relationship with Lila Michaels is the best realized of the series and demonstrates to others what you can accomplish when you find a partner who understands you, who understands who you are together, and trusts and supports you. On top of all of that, he's the best lieutenant Green Arrow could have hoped for. Trained, skilled, reasoned, and effective. It's not for nothing that he was able to slide into the role of team leader when Oliver decided to hang up his hood following Season 3. It also speaks volumes that Diggle continued on, taking this crusade to heart as much, if not more, than anyone on the team, including Oliver. It's fascinating that he went with Spartan as his codename, as the Spartans were the mighty, resolute few who stood up to impossible odds. It's also the word for a simplistic, utilitarian, straightforward life, uncluttered by possessions or grandiosity. Diggle and Ramsey are a joy to watch. Again, the major downside to the character is that he's had too few episodes that put Black Driver in the spotlight. But here are the 5 that stand out the most. At number 5, AWOL. In Season 1, Diggle discovered that the man who killed his brother was a world-class assassin for hire named Floyd Lawton, known professionally by the name Deadshot. In Season 2, Diggle learned that Lawton was hired by an organization ominously called Hive. In Season 4, we learn that Hive is an offshoot of the League of Assassins, founded by Damien Dark, that has since gone corporate and genocidally survivalist. Their foot soldiers, many trained by Dark himself, have taken on the name Ghosts because they were believed to have been killed in their former lives. One such ghost is Andy Diggle, John's long-thought-dead brother. Turns out, Andy was Lawton's first job as a professional killer, and Lawton was unwittingly given dummy bullets to fake Andy's death so Hive could turn him to their side. Andy, it seems, was a drug dealer when he was younger. John recruited his brother to the military to turn his life around, but Andy eventually found a way to deal drugs while in uniform as well, becoming a crime lord in Afghanistan. Hive felt they could put his skill and his reputation to use. Andy was working for a man named Baron Ryder, head of a criminal organization hiding as a U.S. Army Special Forces unit labeled Shadowspire. Their lieutenant in the Stan, Joyner, also worked for Ryder and Shadowspire. Joyner returns in the present day with Shadowspire troops and attempts to steal a nuclear weapons system override called Rubicon from Argus. Diggle is shocked to discover that his brother is alive, but devastated to learn that he has been working with Dark and Hive this whole time. Still, he's forced to have to decide to trust his brother to help him stop Joyner and the attack on Argus. When Amanda Waller is killed and Joyner threatens Lila's life on a timer, John and Andy have to work together to save her. The entire previous character motivation for John, revenge for his brother's murder, is tossed out the window, and John has to reevaluate everything about his life, including his influence on his brother growing up. They stop Joyner, and Diggle eventually comes to trust Andy as finally seeking to change his ways, to later disastrous effect to Team Arrow. Number 4, Suicide Squad. Diggle is reintroduced to his ex-wife Lila Michaels way back in Season 1's Unfinished Business. He calls on her and her Argus connections to track down a guy who could lead him to Floyd Lawton. Almost immediately, they recall the connection that drew them so close while they were in the military, so it wasn't surprising to see them pick up on their relationship again in Season 2. Lila's boss at Argus, Amanda Waller, is well aware of Diggle's association with one Mr. Oliver Queen and the war they are waging on crime in Starling City. She recruits Diggle, along with Lila, for a mission to the Eastern European nation of Markovia to stop a potential terrorist neurotoxin attack by a man named Ghulam Qadir. Diggle and Lila had both dealt with Qadir 6 years earlier in Afghanistan, escorting the criminal through the desert when they were attacked. Diggle saved Qadir's life from an assassin, a young boy. Waller figures to use this life debt Qadir owes Diggle to get them invited to Qadir's to steal the toxin. Diggle and Lila are joined by Waller's latest experiment, forcibly employing criminals to carry out her special ops missions by implanting explosive devices in their heads. She demonstrates the device on Shrapnel, a bomber Team Arrow had taken down earlier in the season. Amongst the group is Lawton. Pressed to work together, they both end up with a grudging respect and understanding for the other. Diggle even learns Lawton has a daughter. The group discovers that there is an overabundance of the toxin in Qadir's lab with no way for them to get it out. Waller sends in a drone honed in on Lawton's kill chip to take out the whole facility and claim it was a chemical accident. Diggle and Lila say to hell with Waller and rescue Lawton and all of the guests of Qadir's while exposing him as a terrorist. Waller refuses to work with Diggle again, but she'll have use for Freelancer once more. Coming in at number 3, Suicidal Tendencies. The Suicide Squad rides again, Floyd Lawton declares as Waller interrupts John's and Lila's honeymoon, immediately post-wedding and reception in fact, with a new mission for Task Force X. A senator has been taken hostage with staff at a hospital he was helping to set up in the country of Kaznia. The squad, now featuring Carrie Cupid Cutter instead of Bronze Tiger, will go in and rescue them while Oliver and Team Arrow have to deal with an imposter Arrow, Ra's al Ghul and Masao Yamashiro running around killing people. Admittedly, Suicidal Tendencies is as much a showcase for Deadshot as it is for Diggle, considering he's given the distinction of being the first villain with his own dedicated flashback episode. The story of Lawton as a soldier returned home, suffering from PTSD that costs him his wife and his young daughter, as well as his introduction to Hive for the Andy Diggle hit, all have significant ties to Diggle's story. We're once again treated to the odd symbiotic relationship between these two, as the squad discovers that the senator staged the whole event to drum up publicity for an eventual run at the presidency. The senator's hired soldiers of fortune now plan to blow up the hospital to kill everyone, including the squad, to hide what was really going on. As Cutter spends the whole episode trying to engage Lawton like he's her long-fated love, he bemoans love and relationships. In the end, though, he recognizes in John and Lila the love and connection that he had with his wife, and wants to protect that at all costs. He wants to get them back to their baby girl. Lawton goes to the roof to snipe anyone who threatens the hostages, as Diggle, Lila, and Cutter get them free of the building. With no way to stop the timed explosive, Lawton is killed as the hospital goes up. To ensure that baby Sarah will always have a parent there, Diggle tells Lila he's going to give up working with Team Arrow. But Lila informs him that she's resigned from Argus. So carry on, Sparty. Number 2. A Matter of Trust, Penance. Okay, this is a bit of a cheat, but the story of the first episode intimately relates to the story of the second. These are recent entries, but strong ones for the Diggle story. Following his decision to kill Andy to protect his family in Season 4, a lost Diggle quits the team and re-ups with the Army. His Special Forces unit, though, plans to steal a nuke and sell it on the black market. When Diggle finds out the truth, he and another new recruit to the unit try to stop it. The recruit is killed, and Diggle is tied up, framed for everything the unit did. He's subsequently brought back to the U.S. and placed in prison awaiting court-martial. In prison, Diggle discovers he's not alone in his cell. He's sharing it with none other than Floyd Lawton. Lawton is sketchy on how, but somehow he survived the hospital explosion, falling through the collapsing roof and able to get free of the building. He went on his merry way until he was arrested months later and brought to the prison at Fort Leavenworth, of all places. Lawton tries to get him to talk and play cards, but Diggle is not having it. Eventually, Lawton gets to John by goading him about having killed his brother. John snaps, tells him that he was fooled and that Andy had survived. Lawton is baffled, and Diggle explains that Andy joined Hive, and circumstances eventually forced him to kill his own brother. Lawton points out the irony that John devoted years of his life hunting Lawton for killing Andy, only to turn around and kill Andy himself. Diggle is disgusted at the whole thing. When Lila comes to visit him, he mentions he was talking to his cellmate about what went down and his guilt. Lila asks who, and when Diggle turns to point Lawton out, he discovers that he is alone in the cell. Lawton had been a figment of his imagination. Realizing his guilt is overwhelming, he tells Lila to go, to forget about his case, and to leave him to face punishment. Of course, there's no way Lila's going to do that, and she recruits Oliver and the team to break Diggle out of the prison. Felicity wants no part in this, especially when she learns that Diggle is not in on the plan. Lila and Oliver decide to do it on their own. Felicity sends the team after Oliver to stop him on his way to the prison, but he easily bests them and takes off. Lila sneaks Oliver into the prison, and they are almost forced to abort when John is not in his cell, but in the general population area. Oliver waits, takes out a guard, and eventually gets in to talk to John after he returns to his cell. John tells him that this is all penance for having killed Andy, but Oliver convinces him that he can serve his penance by fighting crime as Spartan on the streets. John agrees, and they elaborately break out of the prison using a special compound that can eat through material, and something similar to the Skyhook jumbo jet extraction device to get them out of the yard. Of course, with Diggle breaking out of prison, he resigns himself to being on the lam as a fugitive from the government for the rest of his life. And number 1 in our top 5 Diggle-centric episodes, Keep Your Enemies Closer. The first true Diggle-centric episode of the series is still the best, and also an exhibit of just how physically efficient and brutal a fighter John is. Amanda Waller informs Diggle that Lila has gone missing in Russia while looking for Floyd Lawton for him. Team Arrow shows up in country under the guise of a Queen Consolidated inspection. Oliver and Diggle meet with Anatoly, Oliver's Bratva compatriot, who tells them Lila was captured and thrown into one of the worst gulags in Russia. The only way to get her back is to break into the prison. The only way to do that, he reveals, is to get thrown into the prison in the first place. Diggle steps up and takes that on, being caught with a bunch of drugs supplied by Anatoly. A guard on the inside is paid to help them escape, but Diggle has to find her in the prison first. Diggle is jumped by a gang and defends himself well. The guards throw him in a freezing solitary for the incident, and he discovers he's not alone. Floyd Lawton is chained up in there as well. Diggle unsuccessfully attempts to free himself to lunge at Lawton and rip him limb from limb. When he can't, Lawton tells him he knows where Lila is. The prison guard on the take shows up and frees Diggle, but Lawton gets free and kills the guard. Now, Diggle has to rely on Lawton to find Lila and get them all out. They take out a few guards and get to Lila. Then a jacket Felicity gave to Diggle that he wore into the prison explodes, knocking a hole in the outside wall. Oliver enters the prison to help the three escape. Later, out on the road, Diggle holds Lawton at gunpoint, but won't fire on an unarmed man. Diggle lets him go. Lawton tells him that it was a group called Hive that hired him to kill Andy, revealing a chain of events that would fully expose itself 2 seasons later. And there you have it, the best of John Diggle, the top 5 Diggle-centric episodes. There are some great scenes with Diggle on the other shows as well, particularly when John and Lila visit Central City to go after King Shark on The Flash. He also usually tends to have the best one-liners during the crossover episodes. So, what do you think? What are the best Diggle episodes, and what are your favorite Diggle moments? Let us know in comments on the forums and on social media. Well, that's going to do it for this week's episode of GATV Loosed. Thanks again for joining. Like, comment, subscribe, as the kids say on the YouTubes. Arrow is back on Wednesday the 15th with episode 16, Checkmate. We'll be back next week with a review, news, another edition of the list, and we'll see what else. All right, guys. Talk to you soon.